From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts. Welcome to Community Catalysts, the podcast that explores the qualities of community leadership and the many paths and forms it can take. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. Be sure to follow, subscribe, or tap the like button so you never miss an episode. This episode is underwritten by RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative, part of the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. I'm personally thrilled about this monthly partnership that allows us to explore the innovative quality of public sector leadership that's emerging across Northern Virginia. Today, we're joined by Mayor Catherine Reed of Fairfax City, Virginia. With a population of 25,000 in just 6.2 square miles, its appeal to new residents is driven by the region's thriving economy and its proximity to George Mason University. Mayor Reed, who has served just 22 months, stepped up to run for office in a last-minute bid for leadership. I'll ask her to share that story, and then we'll go deep about her approach to guiding Fairfax City's transformation from a small town steeped in nostalgia to an urban community at the center of a dynamic economic region. Mayor Catherine Reed, welcome to Community Catalysts.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
So, Mayor, I have to ask you this question. When we were preparing for this, and I hope this isn't too personal, one of the first things you said was that you learned an important lesson early on about your journey to leadership that was related to one's physicality. Can I ask you to describe yourself and what was the lesson that you learned early on?
So I am very short. I used to be 5'1", but I think I'm shrinking, or at least my children tell me that. And when I was very young, I was the smallest person in my elementary school until third grade. Like when I was in the hallways, they go, "Oh, you're in the wrong hallway. The kindergarten hallway is the other direction." I'm like,
Oh, wow.
I am not a kindergartner. I am in first grade or second grade. And so being the smallest person on the playground, being the smallest person in any group of people, I figured that my only defense was being a really good talker. I understood that speaking with confidence and speaking with knowledge and using 50-cent words impressed people. And it really was my best defense against bullies and people who were bigger than me. I could just talk louder, faster, and with a great deal more confidence than the other kids on the playground. And that really was a lifelong lesson that I have taken into adulthood. Often it's not even what you say, it's how you say it.
And the how you say it is the vocabulary. Is it also the volume?
Well, no, but it's the register. Let me tell you this. I did public speaking in high school and also theater. In fact, my first theater production, I was 5 years old. It was kindergarten. But we did theater in elementary school. And so you had to project from the stage. No fancy microphones back in the 60s and 70s. You had to project from your diaphragm. To be a good speaker, you need to be able to project your voice, and it needs to be in a very low register. And so it wasn't that I was loud, but when I spoke with confidence, I also had this sort of bold from my diaphragm way of speaking that people pay attention. I notice that even today when I step up to a podium and I start to speak, it's not the volume. It is the low register and the level of confidence and my opening words, which I always design to make people stop and listen.
That's really fascinating. So let's switch gears and talk about the decision to run for mayor. I understand that it was a rather last-minute decision and it must have been a whirlwind. So can you kind of walk us through your decision to run and what you learned from that experience?
So I've been working for over 15 years to elect women to office in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That's how I know so many women in Northern Virginia and across the state is working going back to 2009, trying to get women elected. And so I was always the person, I taught them social media. It's like, this is how you use social media for your campaign. I sat down with so many candidates to show them this. I also did legislative advocacy. So I worked with every kind of nonprofit. I was on the board of Equality Virginia, I was the PAC board chair for NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia. I was the person behind the scenes that helped to elect people and to help pass great legislation. That's what I saw my role as. And so when our mayor, David Meyer, announced kind of late in the spring that he wasn't going to run for re-election is kind of like, what? So when David Meyer decided he wasn't going to run for re-election, the only candidate that stepped up was Sang Yi, who was a member of the city council. He had served 2 terms on the city council. He was one of 2 Korean Americans who had been elected at the same year, So Lim and Sang Yi. But whereas So Lim has always run as a Democrat, affiliated herself as a Democrat, Sang Yi ran as a nonpartisan. And the fact of the matter is, he works on the Hill for Republicans. But he decided that the best way to get elected if you're Republican is to simply say you're nonpartisan. And because he was so well funded, and a lot of that funding came from the GOP, because he was so well funded, no one would run against him. I asked everyone. I asked everybody in the city if they would run, pledging my support, pledging that I would help. I would raise money, I would knock doors, I would do all the things. No one would run against him. And what I kept hearing is he's already got $95,000 in the bank before the races even started. Well, in these local races, it's about $5,000 to $10,000 in the bank if you're running for city council or mayor. For someone to have that much money was pretty unprecedented, and it was very intimidating. And so people wouldn't run. So my husband and I, our grandchildren live in Poland, and our granddaughter, Violet, was born in May of 2022. So when we were flying back from Poland in June, and the deadline that year was June 18th, my husband Tom and I were talking about the fact that we cannot have an open race for mayor and only one candidate when that candidate does not reflect the value of what we see as a very progressive community. So my husband Tom, we talked about this on the flight from Poland, and he's like, you're going to have to run. You're going to have to run. This is just unconscionable. How can our party not produce a candidate? And so we decided as the City of Fairfax Democratic Committee that the best chance we had of prevailing over a well-funded Republican running as a nonpartisan was to endorse for the first time ever as a political party in the city. And so there was a questionnaire, and I filled it out, and city council candidates filled it out, and then the city committee, basically the membership, voted on endorsements. And there was just this hue and a cry about, oh, we've never done that in the city. This is like nonpartisan. It's always been nonpartisan. And we're having that same conversation this year too. But the fact of the matter is that people know what affiliations people have. And the fact that I got into the race so late, I sent an email out to all of my friends on a Sunday. It was Sunday, June 12th. And I said, I'm going to run for mayor, but I need you to help me collect the ballot petition signatures. You have to get 125 signatures of registered voters in Fairfax, which means you have to get about twice that many, because a lot of people have no idea if they even live in the city or if they live in the county. So some of the signatures are not good. So my friends all dropped by my house. They all picked up ballot petition, clipboards and whatnot, and they spread out, fanned out across the city, and they collected signatures. And then by that Friday, and I said, turn them in as you get them. You have to get them notarized. I'm like, go to the 3rd floor, get Nancy to notarize them, then run them over to the Office of Elections. Just do them as you get the sheets done. And on Friday, I said, just turn in what you have. It doesn't matter. Just turn in what you have, because it was a 3-day weekend because of Juneteenth. So the whole city government was shut down on Monday, and the deadline was that Tuesday. So I'm like, just turn in whatever you have. Either we did it or we didn't do it, but turn it in. And so on Tuesday morning at 10:30, I got an email. It was the last day that I was certified to be on the ballot.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was energizing. The whole race was very energizing because we were the underdog, we were the dark horse. The city had never had a woman mayor before, but you can't in any way allude to your gender as being a reason for someone to vote for you. So you don't talk about it.
What are the values that the city council recognizes? And I'm not looking for the objectives. I'm not looking for the things that need to be accomplished. Can you help me understand what are the community values that are supposed to inform all the decision making in Fairfax City?
Yeah, absolutely. Economic development is number one, and public safety, financial stability, community engagement, environmental sustainability, transportation, quality of life, customer service, and communication. And so these sorts of things, we distilled these down to 5 for the current council. And one of the things that I think is important is we talked about a sense of community and the fact that when we were first looking at these goals, there was a language in there about neighborhoods. And 'cause I remember having this discussion during the retreat. And I said, I really kind of have a problem with this idea of neighborhoods. We're very tribal here in the city. People will ask you what neighborhood you live in. And when they do that, they're kind of acknowledging that neighborhoods of single family homes, most of them built post World War II, and that is the bulk of the housing here. You know, 4,000 single family homes or something, in Mosby Woods or Fairchester Woods or Ardmore or Oldley Hills, which is now Daniels Run Woods, or Country Club Hills. But neighborhoods, I said, we should kind of take that out and start talking about communities because people live in townhouse communities. People are living in projects like Scout on the Circle, or they're living at the Moxley, which has now been renamed to the Point. And these are not neighborhoods. So people who live in our city, some of them don't live in what we would traditionally call a neighborhood. And so to me, words matter. And that's the other thing that as we move forward and we start talking about what the community's values are, and you mentioned inclusivity, that's such a small thing to go from neighborhood to community, but it acknowledges that the voice of a larger expanded electorate than the 20% who normally came from those post-World War II neighborhoods need to be acknowledged. Someone's community is not necessarily the same thing as their neighborhood. So I will say this too. When I first became mayor in 2023, I had goals, and one of them was to have a pride event. We'd never had a pride event in the city before, and it was not without controversy. There were people on the dais who asked why we were funding a pride event. There were protesters out in front of our first pride event at Old Town Hall. But it's important for this community, for our community, to not acknowledge that within our city borders, there are other kinds of communities. We also hosted our first Juneteenth celebration that June, and we also hosted our first Hispanic Heritage Festival that September, because these are communities within our city, a community within communities. In a community as diverse as ours, for people who are like, why are you taking away the Civil War? I'm like, why do you have a problem with us acknowledging the diversity of the people who live here? Can't there be a coexistence between history and understanding that people are moving into our community who want to be seen and acknowledged and celebrated?
Mayor, what have you learned about what it takes to create a sense of belonging? A lot of people have moved to Fairfax City from other places. The city, as I understand it, has grown tremendously in population. What does it take to actually create a sense of belonging and connection and ownership of the community?
I think the reason that people love our city is because it has such a sense of place. We have a downtown. We have a historic downtown. And it's walkable, not as walkable as it could be or should be or will be, but it's easy to get around the city. And we have events, all year long. We have Fundy Monday for the preschoolers at Old Town Hall, and there's story time at the library. We have Rock the Block every fourth Friday. We built the Old Town Square in 2015. We host so many things there now. People love this sense of place, love this sense of community. People want to be a part of that. All are welcome here. Because to me, as mayor, that is a core value that I do want people to feel as both residents and as students at George Mason and as visitors from other places. I want people to know we welcome everyone. We see you, we recognize you, we celebrate you. You are safe here. I want people to feel safe in our community.
What really fascinates me about the challenge of making people feel welcome is how this varies between cities. I interviewed just last week someone from the Phoenix area who got her start in community activism because she was concerned not with how to welcome people to the community, but how to keep young people from leaving the Phoenix area and going to other cities where they thought they would have more opportunity or would have more restaurants or cooler arts and cultural activities and the like. Am I hearing you that in Fairfax City that the immediate challenge is making people feel welcome? I'm not saying that you don't have to worry about trying to keep your children living in Fairfax City, but that's not the dominant thing that drives your decision making today, is it?
No. And you bring up something really interesting. I was doing an event with President Gregory Washington of George Mason University, and he spoke first, and he said something that has stuck with me. He said 73% of George Mason University graduates stay in this area. 73%. George Mason is also the largest university by enrollment now, and it is the most diverse university in Virginia and perhaps the country. So, understanding that they are right next door to us. In fact, the city gave land to the state for George Mason University back in the 1970s. Understanding that there's not a wall, a barrier, there's not a moat and a drawbridge between the campus and the city. I tell people that I am George Mason University's hometown mayor. And so I tell people when the president of George Mason University tells you that 73% stay in the area, I'm part of the 73%. I landed as a 19-year-old sophomore, and here I am, the mayor of George Mason University's hometown. So that tells you something about the economic viability being so close to Washington, D.C., that doesn't matter what industry, whatever your degree program is, chances are you are going to find employment in this area, and you're going to have a choice of employers in this area, which is not necessarily true in cities around the rest of the country. I can't think of how our city could be better positioned than we are to maximize both what the university has to offer, what DC has to offer, what Tyson's Corner has to offer, and yet people don't want to live in a suburb necessarily or in the unincorporated Fairfax in the county. They want a hometown. Literally, people want a hometown.
Mayor, let's switch gears a little bit. I'd like to ask you about regional cooperation. There are so many municipalities, there are so many entities in Fairfax City, and I understand Fairfax City is called an independent city. I'm going to ask you to explain that as well and what that means in this context. For someone who doesn't really know Northern Virginia, can you just explain what the significance is of regional cooperation is in your area? Why is this such an important thing?
So, yes, we are one of 38 independent cities in Virginia. There's only 42 independent cities in the United States. 38 of them are in Virginia. Do not ask me why we have so many, but we do. And it basically means we are not part of the county. So Fairfax City, even though we're smack in the middle of Fairfax County, we are not part of the county. We might have partnership agreements with the county or MOUs with the county. They may provide services on a fee basis, but we are an independent city. We have our own fire, our own police. We have our own city school board. We have our own city council. We issue our own taxes. And so that's what makes us an independent city. And there are other independent cities in Virginia too, including Alexandria City and Falls Church City. And the region itself is so rich in opportunity, industries. We have a lot of universities. It's not just George Mason, which is the University of Northern Virginia, but we have the universities in Maryland, DC. We have Mary Washington in Fredericksburg, Marymount in Arlington. We have a workforce development through these university systems, and we have major industries and a diversity of industries, and they move around.
Mayor, is it ever a conflict between looking out for the best interests of Fairfax City and the best interests of the region as a whole?
I have not found it so. I think because we're so small, we are not Tyson's. We don't have huge, tall office buildings. In fact, we have height restrictions here in the city. I mean, buildings are about 5 stories tall here. If somebody wants to build a 6-story building, they have to get a special use permit. So we cannot house Deloitte or Booz Allen Hamilton here. But we can house small government contractors, and we do. Small to mid-sized government contracting is a really important sector here in our city, and they are subs for the big guys that are in Tyson's Corner, or Tyson's, and in NDC. So we know that if Tyson's attracts industries that benefit the industries that we have here in the city, that partnership benefits everybody. We are not in competition. It is more about collaboration. What can the city offer that supports what these bigger counties or these bigger jurisdictions are offering different kinds of companies? And so the fact that we have a Northern Virginia Economic Development Alliance acknowledges the fact that we just want the region to be a winner in getting foreign companies here. You know, we are constantly sending delegations out to Italy. We had a Hungarian delegation in our city 2 weeks ago. It's like, you know, the region wants an investment as a whole. How it shakes out, whichever companies end up in which place, a rising tide is lifting all our boats.
Is that the advice, Mayor, that you would give to municipal leaders in other parts of the country who, when approached for regional collaboration, might have a knee-jerk reaction that says, well, wait a minute, I'm concerned that if I support this economic development, this whatever, that it actually might empower my regional competitors and put my own community at a disadvantage? I guess I'm really wondering is, what advice would you give to municipal leaders elsewhere about why they should be open to regional cooperation?
Again, a rising tide lifts all boats. If your region is seen as desirable, you're going to get more. So, you know, there's an abundance mentality and a scarcity mentality. If you think that life is a pie, a finite pie, and if your piece is smaller, somebody else's piece is bigger, then you start thinking in terms of, well, I only have to work on what benefits me. I need my piece of the pie to be bigger. If you have an abundance mentality, you realize the pie can always be bigger. There can always be more, but there's always more only if everybody works together to grow the pie. And the bigger the pie, the bigger everyone's slice is. And that's how I think about it. I want my region to be strong. I want it to be economically bulletproof. I want there to be so many different industries here that no matter what might happen to one sector, that people have a place that they can go to find other jobs. That to me is the collaboration that I find in working with the other jurisdictions here in the greater Washington area and in Northern Virginia.
This podcast is sponsored by the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative, RELI, of George Mason University's Schar School of Policy and Government. RELI is dedicated to enhancing regionalism in Northern Virginia, encouraging cross-border intergovernmental collaboration, providing educational programs and networking opportunities, and strengthening the governance skills of Northern Virginia's elected public leaders. If you were going to give some tactical advice to municipal leaders about how to engage with their peers at other municipalities in the region on a personal basis, on a one-to-one basis, what would you tell them they should do? What should they learn about how to make effective relationships and open up communication and things like that?
Invite people over. So Letty Hardy had a tour of Falls Church City for a Virginia Municipal League event here in Northern Virginia. And she walked people around her city and showed them new projects that were going on in her city. And so yesterday, 2 days ago, our Fairfax City Economic Development Office invited Letty Hardy and some of her economic development people to our city so that we could show her some of the things we're working on here. So invite people over. The more we understand what Falls Church City is working on, who they're working with, how they're working, what they're building, what they're producing, how it's all going to fit together, because they're really right next door to us. They're just right down Route 50 from us. When Letty Hardy came here and she's like, this was fascinating. I learned so much. I could have spent more time here. Invite people over to your city, show them around, talk about what you're working on, see where there are points of collaboration. If we're doing this separately, what could we do together that might make what we're each doing separately bigger and better? That would be my advice. Don't treat people as competitors, treat them as collaborators.
So, collaborators, it's about personal relationships. It's about familiarity with the projects that are going on and the physicality of the community itself, and an ongoing discussion about mutual opportunities.
Absolutely, it is. I mean, people might live in Falls Church City and move to Fairfax City, or the other way around. But the fact of the matter is, people, when they are looking for a place to live, they're not necessarily saying, oh, I think I have to live in Fairfax City. No, I have to live in Arlington. Most people are looking for a neighborhood that seems like the right place. They're looking for a house that they can afford. They're looking for good schools for their kids. They're looking for a shorter commute. They're looking for amenities and entertainment opportunities that they don't have to drive a long way to get. So they're not necessarily looking at exactly what the zip code is or which town or city it is. They're looking for something that feels like home to them.
Mayor Catherine Reed, it's time to ask you some lightning round questions. Are you ready?
Sure, I'm ready.
Mayor Catherine Reed, describe your leadership style in 3 words.
Collaborative, caring community.
Mayor, what's the best leadership advice you've ever received?
Treat people how they want to be treated. It's the platinum rule, not the golden rule.
Mayor, for a first-time visitor to Fairfax City, Virginia, what's an essential experience they must absolutely have?
Old Town Square. Because Old Town Square is at the center of our city and our historic downtown, our library, our restaurants, everything is all around it.
Mayor, if you could instantly gain one new skill, what would it be?
A foreign language. Any foreign language.
How do you recharge yourself, especially during challenging times?
I adopted a dog right after I became mayor. He's a rescue dog. And I walk him 3 times a day. And my dog has to be walked, which means I have to do it. And that's my self-care, because if I didn't have a dog to walk, I'd probably work all the time.
Mayor, what's one small change that you wish you could make in the Fairfax City government that would have a big positive impact on how the government serves its community?
I wish we could obtain the technology that I am sure is out there for translating different languages real time. We have so many different languages spoken in our city, and so much of what we do as a government is in English, and it is a barrier to serving our community.
Mayor, this is the toughest question. In the movie version of your life, who plays you?
Oh, at which moment in my life? I mean, my life now. People used to tell me that I reminded them of Holly Hunter. I don't know if that's true, but I could have Holly Hunter play me. Yeah.
That's good. Mayor, if you could spend 1 hour in conversation with any leader, past or present, who would you choose and why? That's a 2-sentence.
Eleanor Roosevelt, because Eleanor Roosevelt did so many things for which history has not given her attribution. So many things. And whatever we know about the things that she was behind, how she moved the needle, how she made things happen, there's probably an even larger number of things that no one will ever know, but I would like to know them.
Mayor, if you could send a message to yourself back in time to the moment just before you decided to run for mayor in 2022, in 1 sentence, what would that message say?
Build up your stamina. The first 6 months of being mayor was just overwhelming. I'm better now. It's 22 months. I have stamina now.
Mayor, we live in divisive and challenging times. What makes you optimistic for the future?
Heather Cox Richardson makes me optimistic for the future because I read her every day. And she has educated this country about how nothing new is happening. It's all happened before. And because she tells us how it has all happened before and how we survived it, I am optimistic that we will survive this too, whatever it is. And the country will go forward as it has.
I read her letters from an American either the last thing before I go to bed or the first thing in the morning when I wake up. It's
first thing in the morning for me because I need hope. I just please explain this to me because I need to understand.
Mayor Catherine Reed, thank you so much for being open to this conversation. It's been great talking to you.
Absolutely. I've loved every minute of it. Thank you, Matt.
So a heartfelt thank you to Mayor Catherine Reed of Fairfax City, Virginia, for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating and reviewing Community Catalysts on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Your support helps others discover the show. And don't forget to share it with your friends and colleagues on social media to spread the word. And let me say thank you again for this episode's sponsorship by RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative at the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. This episode was edited by Nick Living the Dream Tantillo. Our executive producer is John Little. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. If you have a question or a comment about today's topic, I'd love to hear from you. Reach me at 602-688-2724 or Matt, M-A-T-T, at socialprosperity.us. And if you or someone you know has a story of community leadership that would be a great fit for a future episode, let's connect. I'm always looking for people to share stories of their journey to leadership. Just click the podcast link in the program notes. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.